podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. Because every situation is unique, you should consult with a qualified legal professional for advice specific to your circumstances. If you need legal guidance, please reach out to an accredited attorney or contact us to schedule a consultation. Hello, and welcome back to the Veteran Benefits Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Deming. Today, we have a very exciting guest. We have General Mike Meese. He not only is he a retired general with 32 years of service in the Army, he also has a PhD, and he's written several books and articles, including The Armed Forces Guide to Personal Financial Planning. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. He is currently the president of Armed Forces Mutual. So welcome, General Meese. And
Thank you, Rebecca, and happy to be here.
so I guess we should just start off with a little bit of your personal history and how you kind of transitioned from your service in the military to your role with Armed Forces Mutual.
No, thanks very much. As you mentioned, I was in the Army for 32 years, commissioned back in 1981 when President Reagan handed me my diploma. And then after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan for total of about 32 months in combat. And my final job was as the professor and head of the Department of Social Sciences at the Military Academy at West Point. So as I retired from there in 2013, I had been teaching economics and political science and the economics of war to the cadets, and I wanted to get involved in an organization that was values-based, that took care of service members, but wasn't necessarily in the military or in the Defense Department. And so I joined the Armed Forces Mutual. We're actually the oldest nonprofit taking care of the military and veterans.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about what Armed Forces Mutual does for veterans and service members?
Sure, be happy to. In fact, the story is sort of interesting. Back in the Old West, I guess you would call that counterinsurgency operations in the 1800s, when the Army would go out there, and if anybody was killed in battle, there was no insurance to take care of their family. In fact, that's where the concept of passing the hat came in. People would just put money in the hat, and whatever money in the hat, that's what went back to the widow, because at that time only men were serving. Well, when Custer was wiped out at the Battle of Little Bighorn, there was nobody to pass the hat, nobody to pass the hat to. So the Department of War at that time, and I guess we have the Department of War again, but the Department of War put together a committee that included General Philip Sheridan, General Arthur MacArthur, General Abner Doubleday, and they formed the Army Mutual Aid Association, which was a mutual insurance association where you can't contribute to it, but at that time it was only Army officers could join. You'd put in $2 a month, and if anybody died, the family would get between $200 and eventually $1,400. Well, that since has grown again as a mutual aid association of military people. We now cover all 6 military services, and we've got about 80,000 members to provide insurance and other benefits. Those other benefits include advising service members on their veterans benefits. We've got a digital vault so that people can securely store all of their documents. Any of our members store those for free. We provide survivor assistance services. So not only do you get your death benefit, but we help military members get the dependents indemnity compensation from the VA, survivor benefit plan from DFAS, the arrears of retired pay, Social Security, and all of those other benefits that are often they're very generous, but they're sometimes cumbersome to apply for. So I have a whole team of wonderful people who take care of our surviving families, and that's what Armed Forces Mutual does, and we've been doing it now for 147 years.
So I guess since you guys focus on or start with the taking care of survivors, I think one of the first questions that service members face when they're transitioning out of the military is whether to sign up to transition from SIGLI to VIGLI, the Veteran Group Life Insurance, and whether to sign up for Survivor Benefit Plan, the SBP plan, if they're married. Are those decisions that you walk veterans
Exactly.
through?
In fact, when we brief in a lot of the transition classes, I actually brief all the flag officers as they transition. And we talk about the 7 decisions that you have to make, and what you just talked about are 2 of the probably most impactful decisions. First, on life insurance to replace SGLI. You don't necessarily have to go with VGLI, but you should certainly consider something because you're giving up $500,000 of SGLI that ends actually 120 days after you leave the military. And that's why it's very important while you're in the military. And we'll talk to this more when we talk about VA disability ratings. Before you get your VA disability rating that might uncover things that would make you less insurable, it's important to get life insurance from either Armed Forces Mutual or any of the other providers that provide that, because in most times you certainly can get more than the $500,000 that you get from VGLI, because if you're married, if you have children that are dependent upon your income, $500,000 is probably not enough for that. And the other thing is VGLI, the great news of VGLI, you can get it automatically. You do not need a medical exam. So you could, and many of us know service members who've had very bad diseases, they can get their VGLI insurance, which is a great thing that they can get. However, if you're just in fair health or better, you can almost always, and you're not a smoker, you can almost always get less expensive insurance from a commercial provider. In fact, just to give you one comparison, I did it for myself. I left the Army when I was 53 years old. I could get $1 million policy from Armed Forces Mutual for less than 1/3 the cost of just $500,000 from VGLI. So that's twice the benefit for 1/3 the cost, which is absolutely worth comparing. Whether you get it from us, you get it from another provider, if you're healthy at all, you should definitely do that. And the other thing is, if you're a female, VGLI rates do not give any benefit to women, even though women live longer and have less mortality. For most insurers, including Armed Forces Mutual, women get even more of a price break than men do if they get their insurance from a civilian provider.
That's really good to know. I think a lot of people just sort of assume that the financial decision is transition your SIGLI into VIGLI or drop it. And so, yeah, it definitely makes sense to investigate other options and figure out what level of life insurance makes sense for your family structure, right?
Exactly. Again, if you're not married and nobody's dependent upon your income, or as I talk to people, if they're in their 50s and all the kids have graduated from college, I joke with people, if you've made it through 20 or 30 years in the military and all you had was SGLI, you probably were underinsured and you've been very lucky, because you should have had a lot more insurance when your kids were younger and getting ready to go to college. But if your kids are toward the end of high school or they found a way to get through college, you may not need as much insurance when you're in your late 40s, 50s, and 60s. You need to assess how much that is. Maybe you've got a lot of savings. Maybe your spouse also works or has a large 401k and you're not as financially dependent. Then you may not need as much insurance. But in many, many cases, you certainly don't want to have your family be financially devastated, just as they would be emotionally devastated if you died prematurely.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And so you mentioned if you are shopping for something other than VIGLI, that the timing of putting in your VA disability claim, you might want to secure the life insurance before you get documentation of having some
Absolutely.
of these disabilities.
Most people, when you retire, always when you retire, you get your final retirement physical within 6 months of retirement. And that's the physical that provides all the information that goes into the VA so that the VA can do pension and compensation exams to determine whether or not you have any VA disabilities. That exam also is a very thorough exam and may uncover things that you may not be aware of. And so what I tell people is, look, you have to be honest on all of your applications, and certainly anybody who's in the military is going to be honest in everything that they're doing. One of the questions that we ask is, do you have a VA disability rating? And if you don't have your VA disability rating yet, you can just truthfully answer no. And if you haven't had that physical, some people get a surprise. They may get diagnosed with something in that final retirement physical that they were not aware of. Well, if you apply for your life insurance a year out, well before you get your retirement physical, you truthfully answer all of those questions, and somehow they uncover something in that retirement physical. Again, everybody hopes that they don't, but that way you've got your life insurance and your family's protected, even if something is uncovered there in all of those retirement physical and then your pension and compensation exams from the VA.
I think that's really interesting because a lot of times you learn about these benefits or these decisions. You get the education course, the TAPS, or depending on the
Right.
branch, whatever they call the transition assistance program training. within like right around the time you're doing your terminal leave. So
Yeah.
at that point, it's probably too late to apply a year before you retire, but you can apply for life insurance a year before you retire or a year before you
You
separate.
shoot, you should, in our view, apply for life insurance, especially if you need supplemental insurance. In other words, if you've got 2 or 3 kids and they're in high school and you'd like them to be able to go to college, if you died prematurely, they would need some support. So definitely get some additional life insurance at that point while you're still in the service. If anybody's listening to this and you're not yet at retirement, go to our website, aafmaa.com, and you can download the transition checklist. It has everything that you should do from 3 years out, 2 years out. And among those things is looking at life insurance to be sure that you've got the right life insurance. And if you don't, go ahead and apply for that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And as far as applying for VA disability benefits, you can do that. I mean, you can do that at any point, but in order
Right.
to get the earliest effective date, you want to apply within a year of getting out of service. A lot of service members will apply under the BDD program that kind of allows them to get a rating before they separate. But if you're navigating, kind of juggling all of these financial decisions, it definitely sounds like it makes sense to do a consultation with someone on your team or another financial
Exactly.
planner to help evaluate all these options and help come up with a timing of when to apply for the different things so that you're not
That's right. Yeah.
leaving
And so
benefits
that
on the table by going in the wrong order.
yeah, in your final 6 months, you get that retirement physical. The information goes over to the VA. They start to send you the things for the pension and compensation exams. And the VA actually, they've cleaned up much of their backlog. And so consequently, many people are getting their actual housing or their disability decision within about 2 to 3 to 4 months of their final date that they leave the service. In fact, there's one other thing that's related to that timing. If you're going to buy a house, wait until after you get your disability decision. If you don't need to move, kind of do a door-to-door move, because if you get your VA disability decision before you purchase your house, then and you have a 10% or higher disability rating, then the VA funding fee is waived. And the VA funding fee, the second time you use it, is 3.4%. So that can be a fairly high addition to the amount of money that you've got to borrow for that house. That's completely waived if you either have a Purple Heart or if you have any kind of disability rating.
Yeah, and in a lot of states, if you have a certain disability rating, I think most
Yep,
states it's 100% if the state offers it, they'll waive property taxes if you have a VA disability rating of 100%. So that's worth
exactly.
looking into depending on what state you're moving to, or if you're deciding which state to move to. We've got clients all over the country, and there's definitely some states that have more veteran friendly programs than others.
Absolutely. And your website may have it, but what I recommend people to go to, the one that's kept up to date the most, is myarmybenefits.mil. The
Okay.
Army's website has a retiree thing. You can click on each state. You learn everything from, as you said, the property tax break if you have a VA disability, whether retired pay is taxed, all the way down to whether you get a free hunting license if you're a military veteran.
Oh, that's really helpful. We'll definitely put that link in the show notes for this too, so people can look. And even if you're not Army, it sounds like it's got good resources for Air Force
Exactly.
or
That's right.
Marines.
Yep. Now, the
Okay.
other decision that you mentioned was
Oh, go ahead.
SBP. I wanted to be sure to cover
I,
that
that's
as well.
that's exactly what I was going to ask next. Is what your thoughts are on SBP?
Well, just so that people understand it, when you get your retire from the military, you get your retired pay. And when that retired pay continues until you die, and then your retired pay stopped. And actually, until the 1970s, military widows only had Social Security to live off of. There was nothing else that they got. And then the military developed the survivor benefit payments so that if you decide, and it's an irrevocable decision as you retire from the military, do I want to give up 6.5% of my retired pay and pay that in so that my surviving spouse and family can get 55% of my retired pay for the rest of their life? And so it's really a trade-off that people have to make. It depends upon the age and health conditions of both the military member and the spouse. It depends upon whether the family would be dependent upon your retired pay, and you've got to look sometimes at tax circumstances, and I'll give you some of the details, but that's the basics of survivor benefit plan.
Okay, so it sounds like for some people it's a good I mean, it's kind of a life insurance. in a way, although
It
it's not
is.
run
And in
through an
fact,
insurance company.
yeah, in fact, we provide insurance, and I often compare it to life insurance. And the difference is when your retired pay goes up, and every year Congress usually will increase the retired pay by a cost of living allowance. If you came to me and you said, boy, my survivor benefit payment's going to be $500 a month, how much life insurance could I get? Well, if you got a life insurance policy, let's say it's a $400,000 policy, well, that's a lot of money. I'd rather have that. That way, the the big downside of SBP is what happens if your spouse dies first. If your spouse dies first, all of the money that you put in to the survivor benefit plan, that is where the government subsidy comes in. That goes to pay for somebody else's spouse. And so people say, well, gee, I want to put that into a life insurance plan. That way, if my spouse dies first, at least my children can get the life insurance. Well, here's the difference. If you leave the military like I did at age 53 and you're now 73, that annuity and your retired pay goes up every year by inflation. If I had bought a $400,000 life insurance policy 20 years later, that's still just going to be a $400,000 life insurance policy. And so consequently, what we generally find, 80% of the people that have dependents choose the survivor benefit plan. For male service members with a female spouse that is of similar health and similar age, it generally will make sense just from a pure actuarial perspective to pay into the survivor benefit plan, because women tend to outlive men. And as long as they outlive you by 3 years or more, they will make back all of the money that you paid into the survivor benefit plan. Now, let me give you other circumstances. Joint military families, or a female service member with a male spouse. And if the female is substantially younger, then especially it may not make sense from a pure actuarial perspective for the service member to, in those circumstances, get survivor benefit plan. That's something where, again, talking with us at Armed Forces Mutual, talking with your financial planner, your financial advisor, they can actually run the numbers. The DoD actuarial site, you can actually put in your birth date, your spouse's birth date, and it can calculate the probabilities for you of how, what's the chance that your spouse is going to outlive you? What's the chances that he or she is going to outlive you by 1 year, by 3 years, by 5 years, or by 10 years? And you can see actually, just if you were a betting person, what the calculations are.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because, I mean, even you or me just thinking through those numbers without those actuary numbers to back it up, it's just, feels like you're flipping a coin on how long somebody might live or who's going to outlive whom.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, if you have lots of savings, like I said, if your spouse is also in the military and also has retired pay, maybe you'd rather go and spend that 6.5% and enjoy your life while both of you are alive, and not worry about that because the other person is not financially dependent upon you. And again, that's a perfectly acceptable decision for people to make. It's important to think about this a little bit ahead of time, because a lot of it rushes at you toward the end of your time in military service. And the other thing, the Army encourages, or the military encourages you to get the survivor benefit plan. If you don't choose full survivor benefit plan, then you have to go into the pay officer, and your spouse actually has to sign a statement. It's not that my husband does not love me anymore. It's an acknowledgement that my husband has not selected the full survivor benefit plan, and that way the spouse knows that they've got to have other financial ways of taking care of themselves.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that come up when there are divorce proceedings and agreements to split part of the retirement pay, or that the spouses will want to be able to opt into SBP, or former spouses want to be able to opt in, right?
And that's one other really important thing. I'm glad you brought that up. I was working with an Army colonel just earlier today. It's very important, if you get divorced, you must notify DFAS, the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, within 12 months. If you do not do that, then it really fouls up everything. And if it's written in the divorce decree that you have to have the SBP, then you just put that in there. If you don't want your former spouse covered, put that in there. If you do want her covered, even though it's not obligated by the divorce decree, you can put that in there, but you have to act within those 12 months. In this case, it was a service member who the spouse put it in 1 year and 5 days later, and DFAS is still arguing about whether or not they're going to honor that.
Oh, wow.
By the same token, if you get divorced or your spouse dies and you remarry, within 12 months of that remarriage, notify DFAS, and your second spouse is eligible to be covered by the survivor benefit plan. And so that's another very important thing. But again, you have to notify DFAS within 12 months of that remarriage.
Yeah, and I would double down on that for notifying VA if you're getting VA disability. We had a case we worked on for a few years with a gentleman who I think he did notify VA, but they didn't process it. They just sat on the paperwork for probably close to 10 years. And then they finally realized that he had said he was divorced. And they said, "Oh, we've overpaid you by $30,000. You owe us $30,000." And trying to fight them on that overpayment
It's a,
was definitely challenging. So
it's a
making sure
huge,
not only that you notify them, but that they've acknowledged your notification.
no, that's absolutely true. And you would think that if you notified the Department of Defense, that should be good enough because the Department of Defense would talk to the VA.
You would think.
That does not always happen. In fact, frequently it doesn't happen. So be sure to notify them and save that correspondence so that you can defend yourself if for some reason they come back to you later.
Yeah. What other financial considerations do you think veterans or service members transitioning often overlook when they're getting out of the service?
Well, among other things, and again, this is not just for people that retire, people who retire generally have the opportunity to go into TRICARE Prime, and that usually works out very well because from a health perspective, TRICARE is heavily subsidized for retirees. It's a very great benefit that people should take advantage of. What the dental program and the vision program is not subsidized. Those are other decisions that people have to make. And so it's not uncommon, and it's just helpful for people who are doing this to put in their mind, hey, I'm going to go with TRICARE Prime for my health benefits, but I'm going to work with my employer for dental because most employers subsidize the dental benefits, and the federal employee dental and vision program. It's a good program, but it's not subsidized by the government. You just are put in there with all of the federal retirees. So that would be one thing for people to potentially think about.
So do you talk to people about the decision between TRICARE Prime and TRICARE? I think they're calling it Select now.
Yep. We do, and we explain the difference between those two. If you're in an area with TRICARE Prime and you like the system that you're in while you're in the military, when you're in the military, you're in TRICARE Prime. And that's, we affectionately know to it as the Mother May I system. You have a primary care manager, and if you want a dermatology appointment, you call your primary care manager and they let you go to a dermatology appointment or a cardiology appointment or something like that. And they're the gatekeeper that controls it. If you're outside an area that has TRICARE Prime, or you just want to go to a dermatologist without getting permission or go to a cardiologist without getting permission, you can sign up for TRICARE Select. If you don't use healthcare very much, TRICARE Select may save you a little bit of money because you won't be paying the deductible. So if you don't see the doctor at all, you'll probably save $300 a year per couple. Not a lot of money that you're saving, but it also does give you the flexibility to go to doctors and whatever doctor that you want. And again, depending upon your needs, you can change that every November when they have the open season, whether you go into TRICARE Prime or TRICARE Select. So what I advise people is initially stay with TRICARE Prime because that's what you're used to. And then you can always go to TRICARE Select after you've been out and figured out whether that's the better thing in your area based upon your healthcare needs and your family's healthcare needs.
Yeah. We have TRICARE Select for retirees because my husband's retired. And It's been wonderful. I think our copays are like $20 for primary care and $40 for specialty. And it's a fairly low deductible, but I understand people with multiple children or with specialty diseases and stuff, sometimes the cost can add up.
Yeah, that's right. And again, you got to decide what area you're in, whether you're potentially using military health care. The other thing that I encourage everybody to do, I actually didn't do it initially, for the military member, also sign up with the VA. Every military member is eligible for VA healthcare. And in many cases, the VA, it's sometimes is a little bit of paperwork to get into the system, but once you're in the system, it's actually very good healthcare. So for example, I learned this during COVID. As a retiree in the Northern Virginia area, it was really hard to get a COVID shot, but the VA offered them much more rapidly than anybody else. So I got all of my COVID shots directly from the VA. And once I got there, I did my lab work there. I was an artillery officer, so I have hearing problems, got my hearing aids from the VA, and there's things that the VA does that are better than anybody on the outside. And so it's always a good option for you to have in addition to. I wouldn't do it in lieu of TRICARE entirely because unless it was just you and you wanted to spend all your time with the VA. But it's certainly an option that the service member themselves can and should consider.
Yeah, I think the VA hospital system is the largest hospital system in the country.
It is.
And I think generally it provides excellent care. But like any hospital system, you're going to get some doctors that are better than others, or some facilities that are better than other facilities, or, there's certainly no shortage of complaints. But I mean, I haven't seen statistics. I would guess that the complaints against VA are probably lower than complaints against some of
And,
the
and,
private hospitals.
and by and large, most of those complaints are kind of sometimes with the bureaucracy and the paperwork. They're not with the doctors themselves. Every doctor that I've worked with in the VA, and I did the transition team in 2016 and 17, I was very impressed with them, and they're certainly very dedicated to taking care of service members.
Yeah, I spoke to a doctor recently who works at a VA hospital, and he said I think it was like I can't remember what he said the pay cut was compared to being in the private sector, but it was just such meaningful work that he didn't care about the pay cut, and he wanted to be working with veterans and providing service to veterans. So
Yeah,
people are there for a reason.
exactly. That's what I found.
Okay, so we talked about survivor benefits, insurance. One of the things that we see when we work on VA disability appeals, especially for people who've been fighting it for years or even decades, is they suddenly get a large back payment, and they might be getting off of Section 8 housing, or it's life-changing money sometimes if they've been fighting the system for a long time and they suddenly get a back pay from VA on something. And we're trying to find resources to send veterans to, or family members to, when they get this money that they're not used to having, so it doesn't end up like the curse of the lottery winners, where you win $1 million and then
Right.
next thing you know, your whole family's on drugs and you're in jail. And
Yeah, you certainly don't want to have that happen. In fact, we find that that's one of the reasons why in 2012 we started AFMA Wealth Management and Trust, actually a financial planning arm of what we do that is able to provide some assistance for individuals. Again, the circumstance that it was for was not as much somebody who got a lot of VA back pay, but we had a staff sergeant tragically killed in Afghanistan, had a spouse in her 30s with 2 children, had $800,000 of insurance from us. At that time, it was a $400,000 SGLI, $100,000 death gratuity, plus all the VA benefits. And so that was $1.3 million. She was really set up very well if she planned for it well. And so that's where our financial planning teams can come in. So I strongly advise somebody in that circumstance to talk with either us or some other financial planner to be sure that they understand both what to do with that back pay as well as how to set themselves up going forward to be sure that they can remain out of those circumstances and not fall into a trap of somebody taking advantage of them. And certainly talking to some experts, listening to podcasts like yours, getting in touch with a competent Veterans Affairs lawyer so that they can actually manage that effectively.
And what is the process? I mean, we're going to put
Sure.
the information website on in the show notes, but what is the process for somebody working with you? Is there a fee to work with you? How do they get connected with a
Yeah.
planner?
Great example. Just reach out to us. Go online, and most of the information that we provide is just in our resource center. Sign up with your email, and you can get almost all of the resources free. And then if you're interested in a life insurance policy, you can go on there and get a life insurance policy, and you can see exactly what those rates are. If you're interested in wealth management, you can see what the opportunity is for wealth management. Certainly, we do complimentary portfolio reviews for you with our wealth managers, because if it's a small amount of money, it's probably not worth going through all that trouble. But if it's a large amount of money, then that may be advantageous. And certainly, even if it's a small amount of money, we'll certainly get you pointed in the right direction to be able to do those things. And so all of that would be on the website. Sign up, get the information, and then feel free to reach out to us, and we'll certainly let you know. For people that are interested in For example, our survivor assistance, we have that as just a standalone fee. If you don't, it's included with every life insurance policy. We sometimes have widows who their husband didn't sign up for all of that, but just want the survivor assistance services. For example, somebody who died of a service-connected condition who would be eligible for DIC and all of those kinds of benefits and want some help processing that. We do that for a flat standalone fee of about $495, very reasonable for all of the work that has to be done when somebody is in that most difficult time of their lives, making sure that they get all the benefits to which they're entitled.
Yeah, and it's important that they file something within a year of the service member passing. You can file at any time. I mean, there is no
Right.
statute of limitations. People could file 10 years later, but you're missing out on potential back pay if you wait more than a year. So
No,
I've actually found, I don't know if you've seen this trend, because originally I would suggest that survivors wait a little while, handle the funeral arrangements, deal with the grieving, and then come back to us or someone like you in a month or two when they're kind of ready to process the survivor benefits. But I found a lot of the widows or widowers, I mean, maybe it's just kind of a numbness or they want to keep busy. And so they prefer to get the DIC process, the dependency indemnity compensation survivor benefits process through VA started almost immediately, even before they've planned the funerals. I mean, I guess it's everybody's personal choice, but I'm just wondering if you've seen
yeah,
that
no,
too.
well, I mean, this sounds terrible, but you actually want to get it started before the person passes away. And I'll explain the circumstance why. We end up with a lot of Agent Orange veterans that served in Vietnam. And probably know them by heart, there's 13 or 15 presumptive diseases that if you die of prostate cancer, or if you die of Parkinson's, if you die of many of the other diseases, type 2 diabetes, all of those kinds of things. Those are presumed to have been caused by Agent Orange. And if you just set foot in Vietnam and your DD-214 military service record says that you were in Vietnam, it's presumed to be associated with that service in Vietnam. Well, if you go into a hospital and you die of sepsis, it's important for your spouse to know that on your VA that you went into the hospital related to prostate cancer or diabetes or one of those other things, and then make sure that the doctor, when you pass away, even if it's of an infection from sepsis, that was caused by the diabetes, that was caused by the hypertension, that was caused by something else. If that's on the death certificate, then the DIC compensation claim becomes very, very easy, and you're not worried about amending things. And so I mentioned that we have a digital vault for all of our members. We make sure that the service members upload their DD-214, upload their VA records, and then if they're in that circumstance where they're in the hospital, I mean, it's a challenging conversation. We say, hey, if in fact the person went into the hospital for a service-connected condition, be sure that the doctor notes that on the death certificate, and that way they're actually ready. And then they call us up and they say, hey, I'm sorry, my husband just passed away. And we say, we're very sorry, but the good news is we have all the paperwork. We're going to fill that all out for you. We'll send it to you in a FedEx thing, and all you need to do is sign in the various places. And then that process is started. And if all of that paperwork is already uploaded even before the person passes away, then it's still emotionally devastating. But in terms of the bureaucracy, it's much, much easier for the surviving family to take care of all those issues.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And we have those conversations if it's one of our clients and we're helping the veteran with their benefits. And, we know that they're either terminally ill or we're kind of having those end of life planning conversations. But if they haven't been working with you or me previously,
Right.
it's something that's really helpful. And I think hypertension is one of the ones that is
Exactly.
presumptively linked to Agent Orange, and that's one of the more common ones. And VA often gives a 0% for hypertension. So it's not one that people pursue because when they're just looking for their own disability benefits. But hypertension very often contributes to, you went into the hospital for,
Hypertension.
whatever else you
Yeah.
had that might not have been service connected, but the hypertension
Yeah.
contributed to make your condition more lethal. And so that's one that we often like to document for people, even if it's not going to add benefits during the lifetime of the veteran.
No, that's absolutely essential and important. And like I said, some service members don't want to disclose that letter to their spouse. It's really important for your spouse. They already know everything that's wrong with you to begin with, you might as well let them know what the VA thinks is wrong with you as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And it's different from state to state, but I think it is really challenging to get a coroner or hospital to amend a death certificate. So once they write the death certificate, if it only says sepsis, or if it only says, we can still win the DIC cases. We have won those DIC cases, but VA pushes back a lot harder if the cause of death isn't written on the death certificate, and it just adds delays in processing and appeals and whatnot.
Yep, and that's why that's the other condition for the VA, especially toward end of life. VA hospitals are pretty good at that. And actually, if you've got to die in a VA hospital, they are probably more used to being able to put on all those presumptive conditions. So that's another reason to have connected with the VA for service members, even if most of your other care is taken care of through Medicare or something else.
Do you help families plan for funeral preparations as well? I know there's a lot of financial, prepaid packages and
we do.
stuff out there.
We don't really do the planning. We do help people with the eligibility and contacting Arlington and all the kind of paperwork that is necessary for people. Happen to be actually, our office is right on Fort Myer, adjacent to Arlington National Cemetery. And so we help people with those kinds of things, but not the specific funeral arrangements. We do have insurance policies that are final expense insurance policies, so that even if you're in a condition where you wouldn't qualify for anything else, it's a final expense insurance policy that'll pay $10,000 to $25,000 depending upon what you wanted. And it's got limited benefits the first 2 years, but if you get all your money back if you don't use it in the first 2 years. After the first 2 years, you get the $10,000 up to $25,000, and that way you've got at least enough funeral expenses, and you've got our team that is going to help you with all of your benefits, uploading all of your documents, making sure that your family gets everything to which they're entitled.
When you guys do wealth management planning with people, I know different advisors charge different fee structures and do different types of approaches to it, whether some are just investment advising and some
Right.
take a more holistic approach to if you want to start a business, or if you're going to invest in real estate or do stuff outside the stock markets. So I think it's important for people to know what services they're getting when they're signing up for wealth management, and kind of what works for them. What's your model like for that?
There's three things that we do. The first is the financial planning, which is a flat fee financial planning to be able to put together. It's like can be a huge booklet, 100 pages or more, of a comprehensive financial plan that will take you through, and that's for a flat fee. And again, you can see all the fees on the websites, but it's substantially less than would be from a lot of other folks. The other is in terms of helping with investment management. Investment management is also for a flat fee. In other words, it's unlike a provider where we try to get you into our stocks or anything like that. We do provide for a flat fee, like 1% or less, to be able to help people with their investment management. And then there's trust services where we become the trustee. If you have a joint trust for you and your spouse, and you don't want to have a son or a daughter or somebody else to have to be the trustee to take care of everything in the estate and manage everything according to the trust that you have, we can be appointed as a trustee for that. And again, all of those details, you can find more information on that from the website, or just email us and we'll get back to individuals. In most cases, it takes a kind of a personal conversation to be able to understand the value of it and whether it actually makes sense.
I think that's awesome. And I'm actually really happy to hear that you guys have flat fee services, because those are hard to find.
Yeah.
Those are really, really hard to find. And I know that most of the financial professionals, gosh, I want to use my words carefully so I don't offend any other financial professionals out there. But my tax attorney, for example, said if you can find someone who does flat fee financial advising, go with them. But she said every professional that she's worked with are not taking new clients right now because they're in such high demand, companies that do flat fee financial planning.
Yeah, and we do this, and we only serve the military. So our folks all understand how SBP works. They understand how the VA disability compensation works. They understand the unique nature of taxes being in different states and whether or not you have property in multiple states, which is where a trust becomes very, very important, and can advise on all of the unique aspects of military financial planning. What we found was when other military organizations that used to do trust financial planning services got rid of them, a lot of their people went and migrated to come to work with us because we were the people that exclusively knew the military.
Yeah, no, I think that can't be emphasized enough that whether it's financial planning or family law attorney or whatever services you're getting, that
Yeah,
they understand the benefit packages that are available and the specific other factors that surround military life and veteran benefits. Because you can get somebody who does family law or does financial planning and you're trying to explain to them, well, no, I get CRDP, combat
right.
related, concurrent retirement disability pay, or combat related special compensation, CRSC. And you just see some of these financial planners or attorneys eyes glaze over because they don't understand those nuances and how it could impact other financial or family life decisions that you're making.
No, absolutely. You're doing your college planning for your children and you realize you've got transferable post 9/11 GI Bill benefits that you're able to
Mm.
use and take advantage of those for children. And that may make a big difference in terms of how you plan financially. And if you don't
Yeah,
understand that, other financial planners may foul that up.
yeah, and one of my favorite conversations to have with our veterans when they get to 100% is talking about the Chapter 35 benefits, as opposed to Chapter 33 benefits, which are education benefits. And if you're eligible for the GI Bill, you get a certain number of months that you can split up between your family members, right?
Right,
Which actually, I'll put a pin in that thought because there's some important financial end of life planning that goes along with how you divide up your GI Bill. But then if you're also 100% disabled, many states will waive tuition for public schools, and you get a stipend the kid gets a stipend, kid or spouse gets a stipend to go to school. So understanding those benefits and how to leverage them, so if somebody wants to go to graduate school, they're able to use them and before they age out and
no,
all.
absolutely. I happen to be in Virginia. One of my other things is I work on the board of George Mason University, and the VEMSTEP, Veterans and Military and Spouse Dependent Education Program, provides that 100% tuition for all of the students at George Mason or any of the other Virginia state schools, which is a great opportunity so that you use the post 9/11 GI Bills to send one daughter to a very expensive private school somewhere else, and the other one can go to a great Virginia school.
Yeah, I think Virginia, you only have to be 90% disabled for them
Correct.
to
90,
waive
90 or
tuition for
100.
in-state
Yep,
schools,
absolutely.
which is awesome. And the thing I was going to come back to on the GI Bill benefit is I believe you have to designate dependent or recipients for it before you get out of the service, unless you have a kid that's born after you
Right,
get out of service, and you can add them after. And you can put the full amount in a spouse's name, or you can put just 1 month in each child and each spouse's name, or what have you. And now I'm forgetting what the caveat is, but if the service member passes away and the money is or the all of the months are in the service member's name, the spouse and the children will lose out on that. But
uh,
if you put all of it in the spouse's name and the spouse passes away, it can revert back to the veteran, I
right.
believe is the
I think that's
regulation.
true. And the short answer, the rule that we tell everybody, give 1 month to each child at least. Even if the child is absolutely going to go ROTC and not needed and all of that, still give them 1 month. I'll give you my circumstance. And I did not give any to my wife because she's already finished school and all of that. My two daughters each had 18 months. When they got done, we were able to manage it. I called up the VA. They actually had 6.5 months left, and there's nobody to transfer it to because they're over 26 years old. I didn't transfer anything to my wife, so I'm gonna have to go back and take a stained glass class or something like that to use my final 6.5 months of eligibility. But I think you're exactly right. It's important to transfer those as soon as you earn them, transfer them to the eligible children and your spouse at least 1 month. And then you can always move that around if something happens, like the death of a spouse or the death of the service member.
Yeah. Perfect. Are there any other financial planning areas that you think are specific to veterans, or resources that you think veterans should know about that often get overlooked?
Well, I think we've covered just about all of them. One of the things is be sure to work with an organization like us, like many of the other military organizations that specialize in understanding your military benefits, taking care of them. As I said, we're a nonprofit, so we do this. All of any returns that we get, we plow directly back to take care of our members and the families. And the second thing is make sure that your family understands this. We run into lots and lots of spouses who the military member took care of everything and may not have passed that information on to the spouse. It's very important that they understand all of the kinds of things that are necessary so that they can make the right kinds of decisions going forward.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice, especially during a time of transition when there's a lot of information being passed and it's easy for stuff to go in your folder and not get shared, or I think spouses are allowed to come to the transition assistance planning classes, right?
They are, and I encourage that people to participate. Again, some of them are excellent. Some are kind of death by PowerPoint. And so you want to do it early and then read up. Down, like I said, go to our website. I appreciate you putting that on there. Download the transition checklist. Even if you don't have any idea when you're going to leave the military, it's not bad to just stick in there. And if you've already transitioned out, you can download the survivor assistance checklist. That has all the websites and all the phone numbers that you would need when your service member passes away, because it tells you how to contact everybody from the VA for burial benefits, DFAS, all of the kinds of things that you need.
I'm going to make sure that our American Legion post has a copy of that too, because I know they get phone calls all the time. Somebody's veteran spouse passed, and what
Oh,
what do we do
exactly.
next?
And if this doesn't work at Arlington, but at all VA cemeteries, and one of the things that I learned, there's a VA cemetery within within 75 miles of 95% of the veterans in America. So if you,
Wow.
and every veteran who's honorably discharged is eligible to be buried in a VA cemetery. So if you're not sure what you want to have at that time, you can already sign up with the VA and have that all taken care of. So that's one less thing that your family has to worry about if that's what you decide to do at end of life.
Yeah, definitely. The more decisions you can make before end of life, the less decisions your grieving family has to make.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you, General Meese. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and share your knowledge. And I hope a lot of people reach out to you from this. For the listeners, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments here, and we'll either answer them or get them over to General Meese, and connect you with the right resources.
Absolutely. And they'll be able to find that on the website that you're going to post, and they've got my contact information. You can just email me directly there, and happy to follow up with any kinds of questions that anybody has.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. It's been great being with you.
Likewise.